Today we're going to start with a quick overview about charts in Excel and what a basic chart will look like. We're also going to talk about the different parts of a chart. You can see on this slide that I have a completely generated chart with a lot of useful information on it. The first thing that you'll notice is that up at the top I have a chart title, and in this case it says used car sales, and we're going to make a chart that kind of looks like this. We have on all charts a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. The horizontal axis is normally called the x-axis, but in Excel they've changed it to just the horizontal axis. The vertical axis, also called the category axis, is usually known as the y-axis. So we have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. We have a y-axis and an x-axis. On the right-hand side, you can see that there's also a legend here. The legend can be moved to different spots on the chart, but it always indicates that each color of bar and what it represents. So for example, on this chart, the blue bars represent the number of units that have been sold for January, the red bars represent the units sold for February, and the green bars represent the units sold for March. There are a number of different areas involved with an Excel chart, and I've actually formatted each of the areas differently so that you can see that there is a variety of options to choose when formatting a chart, but also that there are important regions or objects that are part of each chart. This area here with the bubbles in the background is actually called the chart area. So the whole blocks with that blue background is called the chart area. And inside or on top of the chart area is this region that I've highlighted in a blue gradient, which gets a little transparent towards the top, which is actually known as the plot area. So data is plotted on the plot area, and the plot area, as well as the chart title, the horizontal axis title, and the vertical axis title, as well as the legend, all show up on top of the chart area. Now we have actually across the bottom, we have models of different cars. So we have our Lynx, the Tiger, the Wombat, and Ptarmigan, and the different number of units sold. Now each of these color bars represents a different series, and we can have multiple series within our chart, and we'll look at how this chart has been put together using Excel. We're going to start today by creating a very basic bar chart or column chart as they're known in Excel, and I'll also show you some more advanced features with working with charts. But first of all, with our basic chart, let's say I had a very simple example with data, which is simply multiple series of data in columns. So I have January numbers and February numbers and March numbers all in separate columns, and I have a different car or vehicle on each row. Now if I want to make a very basic chart, what the best option to do is simply select all of the values in my chart, including the column headings. Now with the column headings already selected, then when I click on Insert at the top of the ribbon and I choose Column, then I have the options of choosing different types of column charts, and I'll start with a basic 2D or clustered column chart. As you move over each column in the library, you'll see that they have different names, and if you read them carefully, you'll find that each different type of chart is used to do something specific. So for example, this 100% stacked column is used to emphasize the proportion of each data series. But we want is a simple clustered column in where we want to order the categories, it's not important, or for displaying item counts. So this is actually an item count. So let's choose 2D column. And you'll see that as soon as I click on the type of chart I wanted, the chart is automatically generated on the same worksheet, and it floats on top of this worksheet, and you can see that I can pick it up and move it around in different locations. You'll see also that because I included January, February, and March, then it is included in my legend, and you'll see that because I had included the words for Lynx, Tiger, and Wombat, they're also included as our horizontal axis or our category axis. So I made a mistake earlier. The y-axis is the vertical axis, and the x-axis or the horizontal axis is known as our category axis. There are a couple of things we can do with this chart. I can move to the chart layouts, and I see that there is a simple chart for layout 1, and that includes a title. And now I can click inside this title box or double click inside if necessary, and I can say units sold. So that's our units sold for the first quarter in 2010. And we have a nice simple chart, or a nice simple title. There are a number of other options here, and in fact in chart layout there are a lot of different options. So I can just pick a different one, And if you leave your mouse over it, you'll see it's just called Layout 10. When I switch to Layout 10, I get different items appearing, and I'll just go back and choose a more common layout, and I can choose something like that or one of the original ones. So that's a pretty basic way to look at the chart. There are a number of chart styles I can look at, and in fact you'll see that they're always numbered with style 27 or style 28, and if I just pick one of these multicolored ones that I like with the highlighting on it, you see that you can very easily prepare very useful and interesting charts with a lot of impact. Now that explains the very basic way to make a chart, but our data is very rarely that simple. If you look at our sheet 1 original data, then you can see that I actually have some columns that are extra and rows that are extra, and the fact that the price column is here between vehicle and the months would cause problems when I tried to chart it. So if I'm going to try this anyway. I'm going to select vehicle all the way down to March and include the numbers for Ptarmigan, but don't include your totals, and I want to create a chart for that. I'm going to choose Insert, and I click Column, and again I choose 2D Column, Clustered Column. Now you can see that this chart looks a little unusual and in fact is not what I want represented at all. Now what I can do is I can actually change the data that this chart is based on. So we have the chart itself being based on data that is sitting in the worksheet. Now as soon as we created this chart, I now have some chart tools at the top of the ribbon, and I'm given the Design tab, the Layout tab, and the Format tab. On the Design tab, we have a data group, and there's a button that allows me to select data. So I can select the range or change the data range included in the chart. So I'm going to click on Select Data, and you can see the little dancing outline of the range that I have selected. And it's actually a bit of a confusing change here. What I want to do is I want to eliminate the price series. So I can see on the horizontal category access labels, I can click on price, and I can actually hopefully remove it from my list. No, I can't click remove. So I'm going to first of all switch the rows and columns, and you'll see that the lynx, tiger, and wombat fall to my horizontal axis, and my price, January and February, are now different series. So this is actually what I want. So the car is a category, and the series is going to be for each month in this particular case. So I can click on add, or click on price, and now I can remove it. Now my chart is starting to look a little bit better. So if I click on OK, I can now see that the data that was selected for my chart is a little bit of a different shape. So I have in blue the data points that are going to be plotted. In green, this green outline here shows my series labels, and over here in purple I have my category labels, and then I have the word vehicle, which I'll use for a label or a title a little bit later on. So that's what you'll need to do if you ever have the situation where you try to chart something and you have some extra data that might be there. So make sure that you know how to use these select data options. You may have to switch between row and column depending on what happens, and we're going to look at this particular feature in a little bit more detail shortly. Now with this particular chart, I'm going to make a few changes to it, and in fact I'm going to go to the Layout tab, and I can see that I can choose a chart title, and I'm going to say that the title is Centered Overlaid Title, so it overlays the title without resizing the chart. So I'm going to do that, and I can click inside, delete the text, and I can call it Used Car Sales for the first quarter of 2010. Now I actually don't like the way it looks sitting on top of the chart that way, so I can just simply choose chart title, choose above chart, and then it moves my chart. Well, it moves my title, but it scrunches my chart a little bit. So what I can do is I can move my mouse to the lower left hand corner, and you'll see that I can now resize by clicking and dragging, and that makes the chart a little bit bigger and easier to read. Now I can actually add a title below, so I'm going to go to my axis titles, and my primary horizontal axis is going to be called models, for models of car, and I need a vertical axis title which will be rotated so that it's up and down, and this is units sold. It's not dollars values, it's the number of cars that have been sold for each month or each type of car. So we have things a little bit more clear here. Now, one of the things I might want to do is maybe I want to switch this to a different type of chart. So instead of having a bar chart, I might want to have a line chart. I can do that on the Design tab, and the Design tab even allows me to change the chart type. So I can simply click on the Change Chart Type, and you get a much larger menu that you would normally see that when we first inserted the chart. So there are a number of different chart types, and we start off with column charts, which is what Excel calls a bar chart, or what normal people would call a bar chart. Excel calls a column chart. We have a line chart, and there are a number of different options for line charts. We could have stacked lines, we could have 100% stacked lines, and we could have stacked lines with markers. So I'm just going to choose lines, and I can hit OK, but make sure you take some time to explore some of these other options. I'm going to click on OK, and now I can see that my chart is a very nice looking line chart. But look at what this chart is trying to tell you. Does it look like sales have been very good, or does it look like sales have been very poor recently? Now this can be a bit misleading. The problem with this chart is that I have my line going high on the left-hand side and low at the bottom. But this doesn't mean sales have been going down, because across the bottom we actually have models of cars. So what this chart really says is that Ptarmigan car sales are a lot less than Lynx car sales. So this is really a good indicator of how you want to be able to interpret charts and read them correctly. Now each line is a different month. So I see that January sales is the lower line, and in fact for January, for the most part, that's where the lowest sales occurred. And if I look at February, they're slightly higher for most of the cars except for the Ptarmigan, and then March is the purple line up on top here. So it's really hard from this particular chart to see how our sales have been doing over a period of time. So this is where we need to switch the rows and the columns. So there's actually a button here on the Design tab called Switch Row and Column. So it just swaps the data over the axis. So I switch it, and now I get a different line for each car instead of a different line for each month. So across the bottom we have January, February, and March, and I can see that sales for the Ptarmigan are much lower than sales for the Lynx, which is also information that was provided on the previous chart. But now this gives a more clear indication of sales over a period of time, which is where you really want to be using line charts. But now that I've switched it to a line chart, now January, February, and March are our categories, and the different models are our series of data. Well, then I want to change my title down at the bottom, because they're not models across the bottom anymore. We have months. And that's a really good beginning for our chart. Now we want to make our chart a little more impressive, so we can do a few things. I can simply select my chart title, and I can go back to the Home tab, and I can increase the size of the title. I can change the fonts if I want to make a better looking title font. Maybe this text is a little too small, so I'll make it bigger. And you'll see that it's very easy to change and modify the way the chart looks. And in fact, I'll also change this to a matching font and increase the size a little bit. Oh, I don't want it bolded though. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Now, I did tell you about the chart area and the plot area. So if you move your mouse over it, you can actually see that the tooltips pop up and show you these different regions. If I right-click on the chart area, then I can choose Format Chart Area. And that allows me to alter the fill, and I can choose a solid color fill, and you'll see that the preview will appear in the background. So I can see what everything's going to look like, and I can even have the transparency adjusted. I'll leave that full for now. And there's nice gradients, and a gradient or a preset can be something like late sunset, so you can have these very dramatic looking color changes. But one of the fun ones is this picture or texture fill. I like showing off this because we have our little dead fish in the background, or fossil texture. And I can simply select the plot area, and now I'm actually formatting the plot area without even changing that dialog box. But just to show you how that's done, I'm going to right-click on the plot area, choose Format Plot Area, and I want to make it stand out, so I'll put that bubbles in the background. So now if I was doing a chart on the effect of car emissions on wildlife or fish, then this brings some sort of theme to our presentation. So I have some nicely formatted charts. Now, you wouldn't necessarily want to go this crazy with your designs. Just pick something simple and have the numbers speak for themselves. So that's how we can create a chart in Excel.